I think everyone thinks about the efficiencies and cost savings, all those things that you want to drive with implementing new technology. But this is also giving our caregivers more time at the bedside. And they're spending more time with our clients and not having to fumble through a technology that just isn't working in the way that they needed to today. And so that's another big piece. Think about the quality piece, right? That when you implement something like this, where they actually have more time to spend with their clients and their family members, they're trying to make sure that they're doing their ADLs. And so all those things are so much easier now as we've made the transition.
Welcome to another episode of the Home Health 360 podcast, where we speak to home-based care professionals from around the globe. I'm your host, Erin Valier, and today we are joined by Anthony Sparrow. Anthony is a senior executive with over 20 years of both healthcare operations and business development experience. His experience spans senior living, home health, hospice, pharmacy, and personal care. And currently, Anthony is leading a multi-state post-acute healthcare organization as CEO of Caring People. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I think you're the perfect person to have on the show today to talk about the topic, which is all about what happens when you decide to come off of a proprietary system. And for those who are like, what's a proprietary system? That's when you choose to develop your own EMR, your own software to support the business, rather than purchasing something that some people call off the shelf or like a more commercial product that's just, here you go, here's the keys. Before we dive into the questions, though, I'm curious. I know you haven't been with Caring People for 20 years, but do you know the story or anything about why you guys 20 years ago decided to be in the software business rather than buy a software for the company?
Yeah, Erin, actually, this week is my 3-year anniversary with Caring People.
Happy anniversary!
Obviously, I wasn't here 20 years ago, but there was not a lot of different systems or platforms out there that home care providers could use. And I think even back then, there were so many organizations that were still doing things that were manual or on paper. And so I think the organization made a decision at that point to develop their own software system. And for a long time, it worked. It was a good billing software. It was a decent scheduling software. But I think, like many organizations, as the needs change and develop, and I think things became a little bit more complex, there was a lot of different things that were put in place that were manual sort of processes that had to help fill some of the gaps in some of the systems. As time went, that was a challenge as we kept moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Boy, can I appreciate the fact that your software system can be the limiting factor and you just create your whole world around it. You hire more admin staff, you do this thing on paper, all this stuff. So I imagine a cumulative effect of that happening over and over across the 20 years influenced your decision to move away. But what was it? What was that thing? What was the straw that made you decide it was time to change? And what ultimately led you to choose AlayaCare as your partner?
We went through probably a 2-3 year period of time where we did a number of acquisitions. We expanded out. So we went from 2 states, primarily the Northeast, both New York and New Jersey, and we expanded into Connecticut, Massachusetts, Texas, Dallas, and Houston. We expanded down the East Coast of Florida. And we did this through a lot of acquisitions and bringing new folks into the Caring People family. And I think that was, for us, a big sort of push to really understand, how do we effectively integrate these companies in? How do we have them become part of our culture relatively quickly? How do we start sharing information and best practices and all those things that we were having success with, in really trying to share some of that with the new folks coming on board? And we didn't really have a platform that could accomplish that in the way that we needed to. And so that's why we looked at AlayaCare. And I think you and I have talked about this before, Erin, a little bit. We looked at AlayaCare, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, even before my time. And we vetted a lot of different systems. We just didn't feel like the private duty home care platforms were in a place where they could meet the needs of our organization. And then all of a sudden you had rapid development and you had really your platform, from our perspective, went leaps and bounds in terms of the development where it needed to be. And when you all came back to us, and I was with the organization, so for me, it was the first time, we were just so blown away at everything that AlayaCare offered. And we wanted to become early adopters of this.
Oh, we appreciate your leap of faith there. 5 years ago, I was with the company. I've been there for 7 years. And I'm thinking back 5 years ago, we still had a lot of growing to do. It's been exciting to watch the platform transform over the last 5 years, and we continue to do so. I'm really excited to watch what we can do with you, not for you, but with you as you continue to grow and scale your business. I want to talk about change management because that's the scary part, right? I talk to people on a daily basis, and sometimes I run across somebody on a proprietary system and they're like, I've been on here for 20 years and this is all my people know, and they don't like change. And my rebuttal to that is, of course we like change. We don't like the transition. We want to see how our clothes fit when we lose that 5 pounds. We want to feel good after we've learned this new skill or whatever. We just don't like that real uncomfortable transition part. So I'm curious, what did getting internal buy-in for such a major transformation look like for you guys, especially with that 2 decades of use?
Aaron, it's a really great question. Our organization is a little complex, right? We're in 6 states. We have 18 branches. We have different ends of the spectrum in terms of our teams and new acquisitions that have come on board. And things were a little bit different across the organization. I think for us, it was a couple of things. One is we were using the technology, right? So we had folks that were used to using the technology to clock in and clock out. We were doing that from a billing perspective. So there was an understanding that there was value in using technology. We could understand, and the teams understood that down to the caregiver level. So I think that's number one. Number two is we also understood that we had a lot of workarounds. We had a lot of manual processes that we had to integrate into the system. So even though we had this proprietary automated system, we had to have so much sort of manual processes that were along with that to fill a lot of the gaps in the information. And by the time we made this decision to go with AlayaCare, there was a level of frustration in the organization that was impacting our ability to recruit folks. It was impacting our ability to retain top talent. And so for us, it was really kind of a natural transition. And I'll tell you, I think there was actually sort of a celebration that as soon as we mentioned that we were going with AlayaCare, it was like, oh my God, finally. It's interesting. We had folks that I think that were on the sort of borderline a little bit. Do I stay with this organization or do I leave? And other folks that we were in the process of recruiting, we started to use the fact that we were bringing AlayaCare into the organization as a real recruiting tool for folks. So I think 2 things. We kept people, retained them, knowing that we were moving to a new technology, and then we were able to recruit really high-level folks that wanted to be a part of this transition as we move forward. So the buy-in was not a challenge. I think they were starving for this type of technology.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always say that people change for one of 2 reasons. It's either they've experienced enough pain that they got to change, and it sounds like that's where you guys fell into, or you just love this thing so much that you can't help but change. But I don't know. Most people have fallen into that former category. It's like, ouch, this hurts too bad. I got to do something different. For those people who are kind of like on the fence, and I'm asking this more tactically for the folks on the line that are curious about what they could do if they're considering a change, were there any particular strategies for those people who are on the fence and the folks that you decided were worth keeping? How did you tactically go about managing that change effectively and getting them to want to be there?
We had one internal key stakeholder who really led this whole process, and that was Marissa Kornblum, who's our CFO. She worked very closely also too with Liz Brown, our VP of Clinical and Compliance. She worked with Christine DeLeo, our Chief Operating Officer. And so the way that she approached this, which I thought was genius, and I think it helped us really get some really initial buy-in and traction out of the gate, is that she set up these sort of different groups, right? Depending on discipline. So there was a clinical group, there was a financial group, there was an operational team. So before we even dove into anything around implementation, and this is what I would just recommend to anyone who's looking to move towards AlayaCare, is that we expose these folks in the very beginning in these work groups, these work sessions where they just could get exposed to it. They could see the processes, they could see how the system works, they could input data, they could understand the benefit of it. And then what we tried to do is spend time comparing it to what they were doing today. So when they looked at the proprietary system, they looked at all the manual processes. Rather than just telling them, we would show them that and we would work through those sessions. We did that all on the front end. And I think that really helped to accelerate adoption across the organization.
Yeah, I think you're right. I had the pleasure of working very closely with Marissa and the team, and she is quite lovely. And not everybody will allow us to get that intimate, if you will, in the conversation. We did have the opportunity to come on site. That was lovely. And I think to your point, being able to observe what they were doing today and then show them, translate that to the new system, that got a lot of people excited. And I'm glad that you guys were able to take advantage of that excitement and the buy-in. When people have an opportunity to weigh in, ask questions, try to break it, something new, they feel empowered, like it was partly their decision.
I'll even take it a step further. We did this at the board level. Obviously, we had tremendous support through our board and our organization about moving to a new technology. And so one of our first board meetings we had as we were moving towards this implementation process, we had made the decision to go with AlayaCare. We actually had one of our regional directors of operations, Brady Kopp, who runs New Jersey. He was one of our super users. He's a young leader doing great things for the organization. He really stepped in to be this sort of super user within AlayaCare. But we had him come in. It was classic. We had him come into the board meeting and he did a demonstration for the board. And I think what was important for me, I said, Brady, let's show them how AlayaCare is going to work. More importantly, let's show them how we're doing it today. I just remember them looking at, oh my God, how fast can we get this thing implemented? Because they could see how cumbersome and how much work we were doing that just wasn't productive. So, yeah.
That's very cool. And you said something that made me excited because this regional director could not have had a ton of experience on AlayaCare. It's not like he was a super user for many years. It sounds like I'm a super user on this thing that I've been using for the last 20 years, blah, blah, blah. And I've been using this thing for 5 minutes and now look what I can do. That's very cool.
We had just finished implementing New Jersey. And I think it was probably a couple of weeks after that we're asking Brady to do this. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little nervous of how that was going to go, but it was amazing. I do think, to your point, I think that is also attributable to the technology and how user-friendly it is and how intuitive it is and relatively easy to work through.
Super important, especially as you're onboarding new people. Get them, hit the ground running. I want to talk a little bit about your implementation strategy. You had a complex project. You were on a proprietary system for 20 years.
We're 6 states, but we have 18 branches, though, within those states.
And you like the most regulated states for some reason. New York, New Jersey, Texas.
I didn't choose those. I was just happy that we weren't in California. So
I don't know. The folks in California are probably happy they're not in New York.
that's probably true.
But you guys approach this differently than a lot of people. Some folks that are in large organizations like this just feel like I need contractors to come in and do this thing for me. And I want the keys when the car's running. Just teach me where the gas pedals and all the buttons are. But you did this differently. You didn't have any outside contractors. You had a very small internal team doing this. They fully owned it. Can you walk us through why you went that route and what are the benefits?
I would say that there's not one size fits all, I think, in how to work through an implementation. I think this is a decision that I made in the organization after talking with the leadership team and thinking about how we wanted to do this. I think what I was trying to really get across to the leadership team is that I've done it both ways, right? I've implemented technologies across different verticals within the post-acute in different opportunities before. And I have brought outside consultants in. And so we weighed the pros and cons. And there's no one way to do it. This is our preference. Sometimes when you bring an outside contractor in, there's lack of ownership, right? And not that it's done purposefully. It's just they're dealing with it. There's a group that's focused on it. Yes, it's not necessarily a focus of the leadership team, right? They're doing the day-to-day. They're focusing on the business, all things that go along with that. But there's not that sort of ownership, not just the leadership level, but really down to the branch level where the rubber hits the road and kind of where all those things happen on a daily basis. And so for me, it was about how do we create ownership, right? How do we get people excited about this? And so, yeah, we made a decision to 100% do it in-house. We did not add one FTE. And our CFO was the internal stakeholder that led it. We identified folks that we thought would really be excited about learning a new technology. So these super users, we identified those in the front end. And let me tell you, nothing's ever perfect from an implementation. I just want to say this, but we started with New Jersey, which is one of our biggest and legacy markets. And we had made a ton of mistakes. I'm just going to tell you that. We made a bunch of mistakes, okay? And then we transitioned from New Jersey. We took a whole lessons learned, and then we went to Florida, okay? We made a bunch of mistakes, but we made less mistakes. And then we went to our largest market after that, which was New York. And we were a little concerned about that because implementing these types of technologies can be a disruption to the operations and what's happening. And the team was amazing. And I'll tell you, I think that one probably we did New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Texas all within the next 3 or 4 months after that. And every time we did it, Aaron, the implementation became much more effective, much more smooth. We had clients that were in the system. We had all of our caregivers in. People were clocking in and clocking out. We were dropping bills, and everything was happening in the way that it needed to. And I also say this, your implementation person was incredible, phenomenal. My team talks more and more about your whole implementation team and the support that they provided. And that's not always the case. Very often here, and I know this, you sign on the dotted line, you're getting this new technology, and then all of a sudden, the person who was your partner for the longest time in the process, you don't see them again. That was not it. And that's what I loved about AlayaCare. Like, you were with us, all of you, from beginning to end. And I think that really helped too at the implementation going smoothly across the board.
Oh, thank you for that feedback. We do try to do things a little bit differently every step of the way for the life of the relationship, just to make sure you're maximizing the technology. So lessons learned here, just to summarize, pick the right team. You had to have good people, and don't expect to get it right the first time. You guys rolled with it. You made the mistakes. It's like, oh crap, what can we learn from this? And then apply it to the next wave, if you will. Then you get a little bit better. And by the time you guys were in your most complicated market, you'd learned enough that things just really started going smoothly.
And Aaron, I would just say this too. We took the folks like the Brady cops of the world and the people who went the first adopters within the organization. We actually sent them to the other location. So every time we had a super user who had more experience or went through the implementation, we actually physically had them travel to the next implementation. And so they were there helping. And it wasn't just about implementing AlayaCare. It was about, okay, implementing AlayaCare, and then how does that affect your day-to-day operations? And that's where I think a lot of organizations miss it. When you bring an outside consultant, and the thing they don't know is they don't know your operations. They may be focusing on getting AlayaCare implemented, but it's not being implemented and tying it into your day-to-day workflows. And that's when you have your team doing it, you have that ownership, that's where it becomes, I think, much more seamless. I'm using AlayaCare and the scheduling. It's that piece of it that makes the biggest help.
Absolutely. Not only that, but that rock star, that super user that you're sending everywhere, that makes them feel more valuable. That makes them learn a lot more. And so you are increasing the value of your human capital, retaining them, and building a really strong, cohesive workforce across, your organization. That's very cool. And you mentioned something that inspired a question. It's about, how do you incorporate all this stuff into your workflows? I know you guys now have access to some data and the ability to track like you couldn't do with your proprietary system. So I'm curious, and I know that you're still in the process of figuring out exactly what you want to track, because it's like kid in the candy store. I can do all these things, but what's the primary focus? I want to hear more about that experience. What are some of the new KPIs you're experimenting with? And how did you arrive at the desire to track these things? Because I know you can build some of that reporting and automate it in AlayaCare. How has doing some of that changed the way you operate?
Such a great question. And we're right in the sort of throes of that. I just had a conversation yesterday with our VP of Clinical and Compliance, and she is like chomping at the bit because we've got all this great data now that's in the system. We have all of our states that are rolling in, all the data is flowing through. So what we have within Caring People, we have a really robust compliance program, okay? And so we have all these high risk regulatory areas that we focus on. We track it on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. We do it down to the branch level, Aaron, and this might be something like making sure the care plan is completed timely, making sure that our caregivers are providing exactly what's on that care plan, making sure that there's supervision from our nursing staff to our home health aide. So things like that we track just to make sure that those are happening. And listen, where we identify opportunities for improvement, we're putting plans of correction in place, and we're CHAP accredited this year. We've had 2 deficiency-free surveys. So all that stuff flows down to that. And we're at 85%. So when we put these in place 2 years ago, our goal was to get 85% or better in all those key metrics. Okay. And we've done that. So now what we're looking at, and we're rolling out for the second half of this year. So our whole quality assurance program is going to change. Okay. And it's going to change because of AlayaCare's implementation. I don't want to be tracking sets of data just to track data. We should be using this to impact the organization and make decisions in the organization and provide insights into how we're operating, how we can continue to improve. And we're revamping. So we're taking those things that we focus on, I think we did a great job on, and we're using all of the AlayaCare metrics and KPIs. So our leadership team right now is making decisions on those things or in terms of what we want to look at. But I think of things like within a minute, I can see how many missed visits there were. I can look at like this and see, okay, was there a caregiver that was late? Our leadership call this morning at 10 a.m. with the team, and there was another report. I can send a sort of a service survey through AlayaCare. My super user in New Jersey is piloting this right now, and he already has some really cool data coming out. But you're actually in the module, you're clicking on the client. There's a quick little service survey that's embedded into AlayaCare that we can push out. And it's a score of, I think 40 is the top score. There's different questions that we ask. And then at the very end, we ask, would you recommend us to a family or a friend? Aaron, the thing is this, is that you're getting that feedback in real time. So we're already thinking, what's a score that we're not comfortable with? Is it 30 or less? Is it 20? If we have clients that aren't having a great experience, how do we address those and how do we quantify those? But on the other side of that, I'm all about acknowledgement too. Like when we're doing a great job and there's that great feedback, how do we acknowledge the caregiver? How do we acknowledge the nurse that went in? So it gives us an opportunity to acknowledge really great performance, but it also gives us an opportunity to see how we can improve. But it's all in real time, Aaron. I'm not looking at things retrospectively anymore, 3 months ago, and trying to figure out what happened. I can look at it in real time, which is really beneficial.
Absolutely. I love the real-time data. It allows you to make very smart decisions, not in arrears when it's too late. It sounds like you're already looking at things that would improve your outcomes, like in patient satisfaction. I'm curious, do you have any other ideas? Like what kinds of decisions are you looking forward to being able to make that you couldn't make before in other departments? I know you guys have like skilled and non-skilled components of your business.
We have care management services. We have behavioral health services that are social worker led. We're providing psychosocial services to seniors who there's a tremendous need for that in every one of the markets that we're in. Skilled services, you mentioned that. We're also providing a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia care in these memory care units that are through each of our states. And so right now, we're going to have the ability to look at certain diagnoses. We're going to be able to look at certain outcomes. Right now, we're in the process of implementing the family portal, which my team is so jazzed up about, Aaron, right now, because that's a big missing piece, I think, in a lot of home care organizations. Listen, we're all in a situation where we're taking care of loved ones and family members. It might be mom or dad, it might be our grandparents, but we're all doing that on a day-to-day basis, just based on the aging demographics in the US. I want to know, did my mom take her medication? Did the home health aide arrive? What's her care plan look like for this week? Is there any change of status? And I want to be able to go in and see this information without having to pick up the phone. So how do we make this easier for clients and their family members? And the family portal through AlayaCare is going to allow us to do that. So they're going to be able to see the care plan, the schedule, see if mom or dad took their medication. All of that information is going to be at their fingertips. And we're excited about that. We think that's going to really enhance the experience for our clients and their family members.
I'll have to have you back on the show to talk about the transformation in the client's experience, if you will, the family's experience, and learn a bit more about what you guys learned through the implementation of the family portal.
Sure, I'd love to, of course.
That'd be great. It sounds like a fun conversation. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You did it brave. You didn't care. I'm going to implement a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not afraid of the surveys that are happening during the implementation. So for those of you listening out there, it is possible. It might not be comfortable, but it is possible. Anthony did it. Call him and ask him how. But the impact on your business goes beyond just the EMR. That's my long approach to this question. Can you share how the switch to AlayaCare helps you transform other areas? I know you've implemented some external tools like HubSpot. How has that impacted you, and how are you using data more purposefully in your workflows?
Yeah, Aaron, that's a great point. I think one of the things that you helped us with in the very beginning, I remember this, you connected me with other private duty home care companies in our space who had gone through the transformation, who implemented AlayaCare. At the same time we were doing AlayaCare, we were looking at which CRM to go with. And so we were looking at Salesforce, we were looking at HubSpot, other options as well. We were looking at who had API connections to AlayaCare, where could we integrate where it was somewhat seamless. But we needed to become a much more metrics-driven organization, right? So we had a bunch of anecdotal information. We were tracking a bunch of stuff on spreadsheets, but was all retrospective. I mean, it's all that stuff, right? So you're trying to scale, you're trying to do all these things. And it's sort of like you have one arm tied behind your back as you're trying to do this. So we did it all at once. One of the decisions we made, though, initially with implementing HubSpot, we did this in April of this year. At the same time, I think we were through 2 to 3 states, I think, with the AlayaCare implementation, is that I made the decision to implement HubSpot outside of AlayaCare. We have a large sales force. We have a sales leader. Let's get a clean database, right? Let's create all of our accounts. Let's do it by market. Let's do it by sales rep. Let's have us using HubSpot outside of AlayaCare so that we are looking at the compliance, the types of reports, the information that we can look at. How do we have deeper conversations with our sales folks in a way that really helps to coach them and make them more successful, and looking at that territory management. We made a decision, though, Aaron, to do it outside of AlayaCare. And so that's how we're operating it now. And at some point, we're going to integrate the two. But I just felt like there was no huge need to do that initially. We're still working through the AlayaCare implementation, and let's do that separate. But our conversations are so much more metric driven. We're doing revenue forecasting calls. We're looking at types of clients that are coming on by diagnosis, all those things. We're looking at length of stay, which in every other post-acute industry is very easy to capture. And it was very hard for us to be able to do that. And now with a push of a button, we can look at how long are our clients staying with us and are there opportunities there.
Cool. I like the fact that you guys are in this crawl, walk, run kind of phase. Some people want to just make sure that it's 100% when they go live, rip off the Band-Aid, but that's not always necessary in order to get the benefit. And you guys are seeing that now. When you do approach the integration piece, I'm curious, what are your goals for that? What are your hopes? I know that it's going to be bi-directional. They'll have a trigger. Hey, this person's in HubSpot at some point. How is that going to improve your workflows once they're intimately connected?
That's a great question, Aaron. Even with everything we've done, there's still a manual process on the intake side of it. Right now, we're developing a phase sheet. We're looking at how do we integrate that into HubSpot. So for our sales folks, right, they're working with a client. The client's understanding what services we offer. We're understanding what needs they have from a care perspective and how do we help support that. Our whole goal is to get our clients home. It's where the client wants to be. It's where the family wants to be. It's where I believe folks can have the most benefit and comfort. And we're trying to work through how do we get the service agreement to them quickly? How do we walk through that process? So for me, the thing I want to see when we integrate, which I think is going to have the biggest upside for us and our clients, is having that service agreement, having our front-facing sales folks working with our clients, getting the face sheet done, getting the service agreement done, and having that, Aaron, flow directly into AlayaCare. They're still separate as we work through that process. So to me, that's going to be one of the biggest benefits that we can do.
Save you some time for sure. And eliminate that opportunity for human error as you double entry things. Like that'll be huge. That'll be huge. Final question for you. I know we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything else, any other words of wisdom that you can share to leaders, owners that are listening to the show that are on a proprietary system today, and they're thinking that at some point they want to get out of the software business because that's costly? Like when we looked at your infrastructure, it's like the salaries of your developers that were on staff, and then the server maintenance and all this stuff, all of that adds up. All the paper that you were having to use, that's costly. But from your perspective, anything that you'd like to share that will help folks feel a little bit more comfortable with even just dipping their toe into the conversation with somebody?
It was a big realization for us, Aaron. I think that's a great question, that we're not software developers. We're a home care organization, and our focus is having our folks go out and provide best-in-class care. We're not a software development company. And so that's not our expertise, and that's not an ability for us to be able to scale that. So everything that we did over those number of years to try to get that proprietary system to work, and it didn't meet our needs as we got a little bit more complex. I would just say for anyone who's looking at this, just maybe you got to have that realization. That's not your expertise. That's not your core business. Go to the experts. Go to the folks that live and breathe and do this every day and really understand the private duty home care space. And I would say, listen, the software has come a long way. The platform has come light years. I think I mentioned in the last 5 years, but even in the last 2 years, you don't want to be left behind. Like some of the AI stuff that you have coming out as part of this system in the future. And if you are behind the 8 ball, and having access to this type of platform, this type of technology, then you're going to be left behind. In the private duty home care space in particular, there's so much consolidation that has to happen, right? There's so many mom and pops. It's happened in the hospice space where there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. It's happened in the nursing home, assisted, all of that. But in private duty home care, there's a lot of consolidation. And most of the folks that I know are moving towards AlayaCare. And you don't want to be left behind. Don't be afraid. You get the right people involved in your team. Listen, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. We want to be transparent about those. We want to have those bubble up quickly, and then we want to fix them. And then as we go through the implementation, we want to get better at that. So I would just say that. Don't be afraid to do it. I guarantee you it's going to help your teams be more productive, be more efficient. They're going to enjoy their job a lot more. And that's what I would say for sure.
Fantastic feedback. You definitely want to do things these days that make your employees very happy and make them more efficient, because we all know that reimbursement rates are not going up, and we're expected to do more with less as the population continues to age and they want to be at home. So all great points. I think I'm going to ask even just one more question. It has to do with the security piece of it, because I know keeping up with the security standards that are required these days, because healthcare has a target on their back. What's the difference there in your security level and your comfort level with a proprietary system versus going with something more commercial that has to be tested and keep those standards?
Well, I think where AlayaCare is cloud-based, I think we looked at everything and the redundancy and backups and just making sure that A, we had access to the information, B, there was a plan in terms of, you just hear all of these. I actually personally went through a ransomware attack in a different organization, which was, it was a pharmacy organization. It was in 18 states. And within 24 to 48 hours, we lost visibility of medications going out. So my point is this, that's another focus. You have to make sure your servers are cloud-based. You have to make this just so much with cybersecurity insurance, like all of those things that you have to carry when you have a proprietary system can be extremely costly. And also in addition to the staff piece of it, all of that you get to move to AlayaCare. They just have so much more access to resources and HIPAA compliant. It's the security side of it, protecting the information, making sure you don't have bad actors that can infiltrate some of that. We were just glad to move that over. It was really something that put us at ease.
Yeah, take a load off. So it sounds like overall the switch to AlayaCare was really positive. Not only are your operations becoming more efficient, you're able to make better decisions with the real-time data. Your people like it. The adoption rate is good, and it is also secured. It sounds like it may be saving you guys some money as well, saving you some money and also enabling your growth without having to add overhead. Is that a fair synopsis there?
I think so. And I would say this too, Aaron. I think for our caregivers, our proprietary system was always down. There were always issues with people clocking in and out. And I don't want to lose sight of this. I think everyone thinks about the efficiencies and cost savings, all those things that you want to drive with implementing new technology. But this is also giving our caregivers more time at the bedside. And they're spending more time with our clients and not having to fumble through a technology that just isn't working in the way that they needed to today. And so that's another big piece. Think about the quality piece, right? That when you implement something like this, where they actually have more time to spend with their clients and their family members, they're trying to make sure that they're doing their ADLs. And so all those things are so much easier now as we've made the transition.
Gosh, you make me smile. This is a real success story, because our goal, our mission is just to enable the care for the people that are aging in the place that they want to age, and that is home. And gosh, I love that. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, sharing your story today. It has been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to another episode of the Home Health 360 podcast, where we speak to home-based care professionals from around the globe. I'm your host, Erin Valier, and today we are joined by Anthony Sparrow. Anthony is a senior executive with over 20 years of both healthcare operations and business development experience. His experience spans senior living, home health, hospice, pharmacy, and personal care. And currently, Anthony is leading a multi-state post-acute health